Hello, Bronco fans and football fans everywhere. Welcome to Broncos Breakdown on the MHRT Network. This is a show that is everything Broncos and brought to you with emotion, passion, honesty, and of course, my comments. I am your host, Bronco Bill. As you can tell, I am not alone tonight, guys. I am so excited for this interview. This way. I get it right sometimes. Anyways, I want to introduce you to.
it's backwards.
Yes, backwards. It's so messed up. Some of you know him. Some of you have met him. Some of you may not know him. But I'm going to introduce you to the Jedi of the human body, Mario Vetanze. Thank you so much, Mario, for being on the show. I am so excited to have you. So, and it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm excited to be here, and it's an honor that you asked me. I'm always psyched to jump on with you, Bronco Bills. So let's get to it, man. We're going to have a great show. I don't care what Mundungus says. He doesn't know.
Yeah, well, you can say that. I'm not going to say that about him, but you can. You got more authority than I do.
I'll say it. I'll say it to him. I already told him.
Absolutely. Real quick, I just want to bring in some guys in the chat. Clayton Huron, evening, guys. Nice to have you. I agree. Smash.
What's up, Clayton?
And Avatar says, "What's up, Broncos country and Avalanche fanatics?" Yeah. Speaking of Avalanche,
do it all.
I want to ask you a question about this, Mario. I'm wearing a Broncos shirt. Obviously, it's Broncos Breakdown, but I got the Avalanche hat because the Avalanche, pulled that game off last night, late in the third. You were telling me earlier before we went on, you have some memories of stuff when you were younger about the Avalanche. Go ahead and share that.
Yeah, man, lifelong Avalanche fan. So in '96, their first year as an expansion team, I think it was actually back at McNichols Arena before Pepsi Center and then Ball Arena. My dad used to take me to games all the time because he took me to every sporting event that you could imagine, right? And I absolutely loved hockey, played hockey in the streets with the neighborhood kids and all that. And so when they were going up against the Panthers in that '96 Stanley Cup final, Game 4, they're in Florida, and it went to 3 overtimes. And I stayed up as late as my mom would allow me, right? And so I think I had to go to bed about midway through the first overtime because we thought, Avs are going to sweep them. And Van Beesbrook was the Florida goalie, and he was good, but he was no Patrick Waugh. And that game was 0-0 deadlocked. And so I went to bed, and my dad woke me up at, probably like midnight or something, middle of the night, whenever the Avs ended up winning that 3 overtime game. Huey Krupp with the game winner. That was one of his only goals ever because he was some obscure defenseman. And I remember, I knew a lot about the Avs. I followed them. I had all of their trading cards and everything. And when he said they won in overtime, I was like, who scored the goal? Thinking it's going to be Sakic, Forsberg, one of those guys. And it's like, no, it was Huey Krupp. He was like their third or fourth line defenseman. And then in 2001, I was actually fortunate enough to be at Game 7 to watch them win the Stanley Cup against the New Jersey Devils. And it's still the only major sports title that's ever been won professionally in the state of Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really cool, man. I'm forever an Avs fan.
Yeah. Same here. I mean, I was an Avs fan ever since they came from Quebec. And then, of course, to win it in 96 and then again in 01. I got a couple of jerseys. 01 on the back, it says champs, and same with 22.
Absolutely. Cool. Love it. Cool.
No doubt. No doubt. I got a question for you. Okay. Do you work with other players other than Broncos? And for those who don't know, you are the guru of therapy. So before we get into questions, why don't you explain exactly what you do so that people may know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of hard to explain everything that I do because there's so many layers to it. So I just say I'm a body worker. Like whatever it is that you have that's ailing you physically, people come into my office, they kind of give me a short rundown of like what's going on, what might have caused their pain. And I do an evaluation. And then in my particular skill set, I do whatever I can to take that pain away. So I'm a body worker, or, I call myself the Jedi of the human body. is kind of like my moniker, so that's probably the best, easiest way to explain it without getting into the nitty gritty detail. And if I start talking shop, you put a quarter in and the whole song's got to play. So I'm not going to bore everybody with the specific details. If you're watching and you're curious, hit me up. Like, I'm always taking new patients. You can hit me at Vetanze Therapy on Twitter, or you can go to my website, vetanzetherapy.com. And that'll be like a much more extensive look at like every single service that I offer and everything that I do, and where our office is located, how to reach me, all that good stuff. But yeah, you're asking about if I'd ever worked on any other players. So it's really only ever been Bronco players, and I get that question a lot. And yeah, I don't know if it's because of how the schedule is, like with all the other sports, baseball, hockey, and basketball, they're on the road a lot. They're constantly going. They don't have, and not to make it seem like football players have all this free time, but they're not on the road nearly as much as all these other sports. They're definitely at home more. And so I think that affords them the opportunity to come in more. Plus, they're playing one game a week as opposed to all these other sports. It's multiple times per week, and they're out on the road. So, maybe that has something to do with it. Guys just don't have that kind of free time. But some of the baseball players that I did work on, a kid that actually went to my high school, Grandview High School, down in Aurora Centennial area, was Greg Bird, who was like a 4th or 5th round pick from the Yankees out of high school. I think he was a freshman when I was a senior, or he might have been a freshman when I was a freshman in college. But I worked on him a few times, drafted by the Yankees. And then unfortunately, he's out there, wasn't able to get consistent work, and the injuries piled up for him. And I haven't talked to him recently, but that was one of the guys that I worked on. And Ty Block, who's actually a pitcher for the Rockies right now, went to school down the street at Regis High School, was a patient of my dad's forever. I've had the pleasure of working on him a bunch. Awesome kid, like coolest guy you ever want to meet. Played ball at Creighton, and then I think he's been in the league. I think he's going on almost a decade, or maybe like 7, 8 years. And I know he was with the Giants for a long time. I think he had a stint with the Orioles. And I think it's so cool now that Ty's with the Rockies, the hometown kid. So yeah, a few baseball players, and there's some minor leaguers kind of tied in there. But yeah, for the most part, it's always been Broncos.
Do you want to take a question from the chat?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go.
Absolutely. Let's hit it.
There it is.
Mario, were you and Bobby Lashley comparing biceps? And if so, how much did he beat you by? So, that's actually an interesting question, right? So if you follow me on Twitter, I kind of somehow, back on my Mile High Mario days, that account unfortunately is long gone. We won't get into that. No hard feelings there, Elon. But I became known as the bicep guy somehow. I think Sarah Bettinger kind of saddled me with that incredible nickname. But yeah, Bobby Lashley came in several times. One of the most difficult human beings I've ever had to work on, because he's just all muscle. It's like you wonder how a person, he has muscles on his muscles on top of those muscles. Like, in the most respectful way possible, he looks like a balloon animal because he's just so rocked up. And so, I've measured my biceps, okay? And any guy that tells you that they haven't measured, okay, they're lying. All right, I'm going to tell you that right now. And so, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I'm like, 16 and a half, 17 inches, maybe a little bit more after a pump, like some pretty good circumference. But yeah, when Bobby Lashley came in, man, that dude's biceps have got to be about 20 inches around, and that's the size of rims, like big rims on a car, or like 21s or 22s. Like 22s was always like the size of the rim. Like, I got 22s on my car. Bobby Lashley got 22s on his arms. You know what I'm saying? And then that picture that I posted, Mundungus, let me just clear this up, okay? Bobby was wearing he was wearing the tight Baby Gap shirt, okay? I kind of had on a little bit, I was modest. I didn't want to make him feel bad or anything. It's like my arms aren't bigger than his, but he's probably like, this dude, he doesn't work out for a living the way that I do. And he's, I don't want him to put me to shame. No, I'm just kidding. He's just an immense human being. And seeing that picture, because, I feel pretty good about myself. I like to work out and everything. And I see that picture, I'm like, oh my God, that dude makes me look like a child.
Yeah.
Bree Macis is chiming in. She's a chaos hurricane. is her moniker now. That's her new moniker.
Ah.
So if you're watching, if you interact with Bree Maestas, she is now officially and formally known as the Chaos Hurricane.
Oh, do you want to tell the story on that, or you want to keep it mum?
No, I mean, it's not even really a story. It's just, it's something that fits her. It's like if you're close, like if you're in her inner circle, that's the eye of the hurricane, right? You're safe. But if you're not in that inner circle and you think and you think that you are, you're just in the hurricane, dog, and it's RIP to you.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. No doubt. Did you play sports in high school or?
I did. I was actually a baseball player.
Nice.
My freshman year, I played baseball and basketball, and I actually broke my leg on the last day of basketball tryouts. So instead of making the A team for freshmen, they put me on the B team because I was going to miss most of the year. And I was the typical white player. Okay, I'm just going to come out and say it. I stayed on the outside of the 3-point line. Okay, I played really intense defense, and I was a really good passer, right? I shot the three, passed, played defense. That was it. Like if I was going inside the paint at all, something was wrong because that wasn't my game. As I was rehabbing for my broken leg, I was in the gym a lot, just trying to strengthen my upper body, and I did a little bit too much. And so over the course of my rehab for my broken leg, I completely lost my shot. And I like to tell myself that it's because I bulked up, my freshman year, and I got nice and muscly, and I just lost my shot. Yeah, exactly. But in reality, I just wasn't very good. And I think I thought that I was. But no, baseball was my sport, and I could have gone to play at a JUCO, but I just decided to go to CU Boulder instead because I didn't want to spend 2 years at some podunk town in Western Colorado or Kansas or Nebraska, And the funny story, I wanted to play football my freshman year, but freshman year of high school, I was 5'2", 110 pounds, like soaking wet. Like I was just a little guy. Okay. I was like as tall as Cameron Parker is. Okay. I was little. So, and I can say that. I know Cam already said that he's not listening. So I'm going to take shots at Cameron while I have the chance. Okay.
Go for it.
And so my dad actually was the one that talked me out of playing football, despite the fact that he had worked on Bronco players and NFL players since the days of Rick Upchurch and Otis Armstrong. Right.
Wow. And
then my senior year of high school, I filled out a little bit. And he's like, well, why don't you go out for football now? And I was like, well, I played receiver, and I don't want we ran an offense where they ran the ball like 70% of the time. I'm like, I'm not joining the football team so I could go on the perimeter and block. I'll just watch it from the stands. And then when I was at CU, my junior year, again, worked out a lot, bulked up a little bit, played flag football. We had a really good team. I don't mean to brag, but our flag football team was really good. No, I'm not going to be that guy. And then my dad says, well, why don't you try to walk on at CU? I said, what? The CU, when I was there, like this would have been like 2009, 2010. When I was there, CU sucked. Like, not as bad as they were last year, but they were a bad team. Right. And so I don't know if my dad thought that like maybe I could just sneak my way onto the team because they just weren't very good. And I would just be like an extra body, right? No, not even that. He's just like, oh, they're so bad. Like maybe you wouldn't look as bad by comparison. So I actually went out for a couple workouts and, ran routes as a receiver and did like some of the combine drills and stuff. And, obviously they weren't going to give me a scholarship. They're like, oh, we can keep you around. But you're probably not going to see any playing time. And I was like, no, thanks. I'm good. Right. But I did steal I don't know if I stole it or if I was allowed to keep it, but I still have my practice jersey from when I was trying out for CU football, just to have proof that I actually did it. So never officially played tackle football past middle school. Baseball was always my sport.
Well, I'll tell you what, for the record, we're going to go on and say that you were given that practice jersey. How's that? We don't want any problems with you.
I didn't even have to steal it. They gave it to me. They said, hey, here's your participation trophy.
Exactly. I do want to note, though, I did ask you to be on for 20 minutes. It's totally up to you how long you want to be on. We're at the 15, almost 16-minute mark. I just want
let's just get through whatever questions that you want to ask or anything that you want to talk about, Bill, and we'll just play it by ear.
All right, man. It's your call. I do have a question though. What's the difference other than equipment that you have at your office to treat people other than going on the road, or do you go on the road?
I do go on the road. So during the Broncos season, so I get a list of the hotels that they stay at on the road, and I have a handful of guys who, kind of pay my way. So I'll usually buy my own plane ticket. I'll book my own hotel so that I get those points on my card. And then I have a certain set of guys that I'll see every road trip. And so they basically recoup that money for me. Plus they pay for the actual session. So it's been such an incredible blessing being able to do that and having the opportunity to be entrusted with the health of these multi-million-dollar athletes, right? So, I feel incredibly blessed and highly favored to be able to do something like that and do my best to keep these guys out onto the field. But in terms of like our office, so our office is kind of like a one-stop shop. So we have a lot of different experts that kind of all specialize in a different thing. And we have a lot of different pieces of equipment that very few, if any, like healthcare offices have. And so the office as a whole, it was kind of the brainchild of my dad, who put it together over the course of being a chiropractor for almost 50 years, of having a different expert in different areas so that when people came in, or it's like, especially it kind of started like if Bronco players came in, but then it was more about anybody that came in. If you needed a massage, if you needed acupuncture, if you needed chiropractic, if you needed trigger point therapy, physical therapy, anything that you could imagine, it's a one-stop shop for everything. Wow. So I think that's a big reason why so many players, trust our office and trust all of my guys with their health care. Because guys, they can only do so much in the facility. They got to worry about, 53 guys plus all the practice squad guys. It's hard for these teams to give the guys the one-on-one attention that they really need, especially at this high of a level. And I mean, if you were to ask around, the majority of players in the NFL, like especially the high-profile guys, they spend a ton of money on their body. I know they made a big deal about it with Russ because he's got a whole team of people, but Russ isn't alone. Like, there are a lot of guys all throughout the league, and especially here in Denver, that spend a lot of money on their bodies. And I'm just kind of like, I'm just one cog in the wheel. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. That's interesting. When I heard about Russell Wilson and his quote entourage, I was thinking, wow, I've not heard this before. But what you're saying is that there's a lot of players that, I mean, if you think about it, they're
not to the extent of Russ, right?
Well,
true. Russ has got like a whole other football team that follows him around, and I mean, he's got a different person for everything. But I mean, like the typical NFL athlete, they will have somebody on the outside of their facility that does something to help their bodies.
Well, you have to. If you think about it, their lifespan. I don't mean physically, but I mean as far as
they're
it's very short.
Days,
very short. So they have to maximize what they can do. So that's totally understandable. And is that how you found these people? Do they come to you?
It's all been word of mouth. Like I said, my dad was working on Bronco players. The first Bronco player he ever worked on was Otis Armstrong. Second Bronco player he ever worked on was Rick Upchurch. And he and Rick actually were really, really good friends up until the point that my dad passed. Like they were best buddies. Like Rick Upchurch was Uncle Rick to me.
Nice.
He lived with my parents. Like after I'd moved out, I think he had some stuff to like finalize in Colorado. And he lived in the guest room in my parents' basement for a few months. Rick was like he's just part of our family,
Wow.
And cool. So over the course of all these years, I mean, my dad worked on countless Bronco players, and it was just all word of mouth. It started with Otis and Rick just telling the other guys about him, and it just kind of kept going from there. And it really reached, I don't necessarily want to say a peak, because it peaked and it like stayed at the peak for a long time, right? But the peak was in '98. It was the year after they had won their first Super Bowl. And that season, that 97 season, when they did win their first Super Bowl, my dad was probably working on 20, 25 players. They were all coming into his office.
Wow.
Rod Smith, Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp, Ed McCaffrey, John Elway came in a couple times. I know Neil Smith was the following year, but Neil Smith was in there. Steve Atwater. I mean, the list just goes on and on, right?
Wow.
And so a lot of these
you're talking
guys,
about Hall of Fame guys right there.
like all-time Bronco guys, right?
Yeah.
So it was, I believe, Bill Romanowski and Rod Smith. The following year, they went to go speak with Pat Bowlen, and they said, "Hey, we all go see this chiropractor. You have to bring him in. You have to hire him just so he's in the facility." And Pat Bowlen, at the time, he's like, "Whatever it takes to win. I don't care. If this is the guy. If this is who you guys want, you got it. Whatever we need. If it means another Super Bowl, done." So for 1 year, my dad was the official chiropractor of the Denver Broncos. He actually has a Super Bowl ring still in his safe down in his basement.
How cool is that?
Because he was part of that. He was part of that team.
Wow.
And he was only there for 1 year because without getting into it, we could do a different pod at a different time and really dig into this. But we'll just say that he and Steve Antonopoulos didn't quite see eye to eye when it came to the well-being of these players, right? Mm-hmm. And one of those individuals was in it for himself, and one of those individuals was in it to actually make sure that these guys were healthy and stayed on the field. And not only that, but would have quality of life after football, right? And people in that facility, that's not always their number one priority. People outside the facility, people like myself, my dad, all the other people in my office, that's our number one priority, right?
Right.
So basically, Antonopoulos told him, like, you have to do things my way or you're fired. And my dad said, well, I guess I'm fired. I don't really need to do this. This was more of a professional courtesy. So the funniest thing, like, I have this hat, and I'll try and post it at some point on Twitter. My dad had a custom hat made that said Broncos official team chiropractor, or Broncos team chiropractor. And then it had like Super Bowl champion, 1998 or Super Bowl 33 champion on the back of it, just so everybody knew. He's like, yeah, I don't really need the title, but I was the official chiropractor for the Super Bowl.
Nice.
So it's just like a funny little troll dub, and now I've got it hanging in my office. So yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, it was word of mouth. He worked on all those guys. He actually worked on the set of The Longest Yard, that movie with Chris Rock, Adam Sandler. Because Bill Romanowski was in that movie, and Bill Romanowski was a huge fan of my dad's and loved his work and treated my dad so great over the years, gave him a lot of opportunities. And so my dad got to work on all the people that were in that movie. And then when it came time for, and I don't want to say that he like passed the torch, because we got to work together and we each did our own thing, but I started working in the office. And the first Bronco player that I ever worked on was Kevin Bickerson. Okay. If you remember him, like this man, he had to be every bit of like 6'5", 6'6", 330 pounds, and I'm not a small guy. Like, I feel like I'm pretty built. When I was stretching this guy's leg, his thigh was as big as my torso. He was just an enormous human being. And I had just started, like, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, I was just doing my best. Right. And I felt like I blew it, and that he had a terrible time, Kevin did, and like he was just doing me a favor. And I talked to my dad, and I said, if I don't do a good job, what's going to happen? He said, they're just not going to come see you. It's like, yeah, like you have this opportunity, but it's kind of on you to do this. He's like, if you're good, they will keep seeing you. If you're not good, they're just not going to come see you. It's as simple as that. I'm like, oh, damn, no pressure, right? No. But that was about 8 years ago, and thankfully here I am still. So
nice.
Luckily I was good enough.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I got a question. Have you tried putting on that Super Bowl ring? Just curious.
I have not tried to put it on since like high school or college. But I do remember it was never big enough for my hand. My dad had really big fingers because his big hands, like they were swollen from 50 years of doing what he did. Right. So he had just like massive hands, massive fingers. And I remember the last time I ever tried it on, it had to be in high school, maybe college. and that thing weighs a ton. And it weighed my finger down. It's slipping off, like the thing barely even fit my thumb. And he was wearing it on his ring finger. So I gotta go find it. I gotta go through his safe and find it and see if it fits and maybe take a picture with it.
How cool is that, man? How cool. I mean, to just that story, just that memory, just that.
It's
that
the best,
moment,
man. Yeah. Incredible.
That is so cool, man. Yeah. You just have a wealth of memories and information and stuff.
Absolutely.
That is so awesome. Is there, before I get into the really story that I want to hear from you, I'm not going to give it away. But is there any kind of a humorous story, something about an athlete you worked on that was, I don't know, just something out there that just kind of, took you by surprise, so to speak?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like which is the best one. I have a couple that are like inappropriate that like this might not be the time and place. Like the kind of stories where it's like I tell them over a beer, right? But I will tell you a really good one. When Aqib Talib used to come in, and this was after his nightclub incident. I'm sure we all remember that. Yep. He suffered the gunshot wound that allegedly came from his gun, but was like never actually proven somehow.
Sure.
And so what I used to do, one of the things I used to do for Aqib, we have a cold laser machine. And so I would laser his calves, and it kind of just helped with blood flow. It was anti-inflammatory, basic stuff like that. And so I'm doing that at the same time as I'm like grassening and doing trigger point and myofascial release. And so he would come in a couple times a week, and he had the same routine. He would see me, he would do all that. He would see my dad, he would go see our physical therapist, and then he would be out of there. And after about like a month and a half of working on Aqib, and mind you, like his bullet wound was in his calf. So I'm working on that bullet wound twice a week, right? And it wasn't too bad, but you could tell exactly where he got shot. And so I remember after a month or so, I didn't talk too much to him. He was usually doing his own thing or on his phone or whatever. So I didn't have a ton of time to like actually kind of talk to him and connect with him. But we'd have, minor like small talk conversations here and there. So I said to him, hey, Aqib, this scar that you have on your calf, it's actually looking a lot better than like when you first started coming in. And he says, I don't know if you know this, but that's where I got shot. And I was like,
oh my God.
Bro. Yeah, I know, dog. I figured everybody knows. But the funny thing was he had already been cleared, right? Because if you remember, and if anybody listened, if you remember when that all happened, he was supposed to get suspended.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to get busted because he had allegedly had a gun on him. Yeah. But he shot himself. Like he Plaxico Burressed himself, right? Because that's a verb. You Plaxico Burressed yourself. And somehow he got out of it. But even after he got cleared, the way that he is saying it to me, he's like, I don't know if you know this, that's where I got shot. He didn't say that's where I shot myself. So he was still covering his own ass. It was so funny. And then, like, if you remember his voice, like, he kind of had, like, the little, like, high-pitched voice. He kind of talked like this, man. And so for him to say that, like, it took everything in me to just not start cracking up. Because, like, that would be professional if I start laughing, right? But it was hysterical.
How did you hold it back is what I want to know. I mean, I know you're a professional guy and all that, but how do you?
It helped that he was like he's face down, right? Okay. Because his calves are up, and so he kind of like kind of picked his head up like this and kind of looked to the side and said it, so he couldn't see my face. But I'm sure I was over here like.
I'm just picturing Aqib Talib looking up, going, "That's where I got shot." That's just like, holy crap!
It's pretty much what happened, man. In his little squeaky voice, it was hilarious. And see, and I'm more of a professional now. I know it's hard to tell, but back then, I was still a kid, right? I was not as professional, so it took everything I had in me to not just bust out laughing.
Right. I know. I totally agree. I know I've kept you on here a little bit longer than obviously 10 minutes longer
It's all
than.
good, man. No problem.
All right. That's all good. I just want to make sure I'm not taking you away from your family or
No
anything
nonsense.
else
If
you got.
if I had to go, I'd give you one of these. Like I
I
said,
know. I just don't want to be that guy that keeps going and going and going and
No, you're totally fine. I appreciate that. Like I said,
Yeah.
whatever you want to ask, it's fair game.
I have one more question before the story I want to get to. The question falls on what you were just talking about with these guys. With the people that you work with, athletes and that kind of, are they pretty down to earth, pretty humble guys? They're kind of they're not standoffish, that kind of thing. Are they easy to get along with for the most part?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, and I don't necessarily want to name names.
No.
I don't want anything to come back to me. But again, that'll be a conversation, over a beer, right? Sure. But no, honest to God, like for the most part, like 90 to 95% of the guys that I have the pleasure of working on, they're awesome, right? They are very down to earth, super cool guys, like just regular dudes. And of course, there's going to be the handful where it's like, they come in and you already know that they think that their what doesn't stink. But not, man, for the most part, they really are great. But again, I've also had the privilege of working with a lot of really wonderful people. Nice. Justin Simmons among the top of them, right? Like I've worked with Justin since he was a rookie. And everything that you see from Justin and everything that you hear from him and the fact that he was the 2-time Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate, it doesn't sell him short. Like he is genuinely one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. Wow.
Awesome. One other final question before I know I've said this, but this will be the final question.
You're good.
Story. Javonte Williams tearing his ACL and MCL. Do you personally feel like by what with your healing skills and so on, is it possible for him to come back 100% or is Denver going to be lacking that?
You know what, man? I wish that I could give you just like a concrete answer. And unfortunately, like there are so many variables. Chief among them is how does he heal? Like, how does his body react to this? What is he doing to make sure that he works back? And Javonte is not somebody that I've ever worked on. And, I don't really hear much about like how his rehab is going. But yeah, in my experience, like there are some guys that I work on who heal like Wolverine, right?
Wow.
Like over the past few years, like you would be surprised how many guys I've worked on where at the beginning of the week, like on a Monday or Tuesday, right after a game, it's kind of like, I don't know how you're going to play on Sunday. And Friday, Saturday rolls around and they're good. Wow. It's just like these little, aches and pains and bruises.
No, you're a miracle. You're a miracle worker.
I wish I could take that much credit. But then again, there are some guys that, they hurt themselves and for whatever reason, it just lingers. And there's really no rhyme or reason. It's not necessarily like, oh, the big guys heal faster or the small guys heal faster or like by position. It's totally random, right? The injury bug could jump up and bite one dude and he's out for half the season. And a different player could have that exact same thing and he's out for a couple weeks. And it's not a matter of toughness. Like I want to nip that in the bud and people on the outside looking in where anytime a player doesn't play and their toughness is questioned, you don't know shit. Okay. Like I'm sorry. It's like, I've obviously experienced this and I've been around this pretty much my entire life. And I've seen some harrowing stuff, right? I guarantee you that there is no NFL athlete out there that lacks toughness because you do not get to the freaking NFL if you are not tough. You don't. It's impossible. It's way too hard to make it to that level, period. It's hard enough to play college football, okay? It's hard enough to play high school football. To be perfectly honest, you are not going to be in the top 0.00001% of athletes if you're not tough. So let's just nip that in the bud. Like, this is not a toughness issue. This is an anatomical issue. This is a body issue. Like, there are people who just heal better, and there are people who, for whatever reason, like they get saddled with injury prone, with that moniker, right? With that tagline. and they just can't seem to get healthy. Sometimes, unfortunately, that's just their anatomy. That's the way that they are built. That's the way that God made them. And it doesn't matter if they have the best surgeons, the best doctors, the best chiropractors, the best massage therapists, acupuncturists, you name it. Sometimes it just doesn't matter. And sometimes dudes are just more prone to get hurt than others. And again, there's no rhyme or reason to it, but it's not a toughness issue. That's just how it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. All right, I am going to get into the question, well, not question, but the story.
Yeah, let's do it.
I got to ask you about your connection with the very amazing, very athletic, very remarkable receiver and the very late Demaryius Thomas. Go ahead and share that story, please.
Yeah, so Demaryius was like a big brother to me. I'll never forget when he was drafted. And the way that it worked in the collective bargaining agreement back then is if you were a draft pick and you held out. So I should preface this. When you were drafted, the team that drafts you, they pay for your accommodations because, you're coming out of college. You don't necessarily have any money. And, we know DT's story. He kind of came from nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And his mother was in jail. His grandmother was in jail. He was raised basically by his aunt and uncle. And so he didn't have two dimes to rub together, right? And so during the original collective bargaining agreement, I don't know if this is still the case, but when you become a holdout in that process before you sign your NFL contract, when you reach that date where you're officially a holdout, the team no longer pays for your accommodations. So when DT was a holdout, which, by the way, leading up into that point, anytime that there was a player who was holding out, I just assumed it was because they wanted more money. Right. Having known DT, and he explained it to me, he said, and not to say that this is the same for everybody, but he said, I want to play. Mm-hmm. My agent is the one that said, we have all these little details that we have to hash out with the contract. And I know Des Bryant was taken after him and Tim Tebow was taken after him. Right. So his agent was kind of playing the waiting game because it's whatever those two guys got, DT had to make sure that he got more because he was drafted first, and that's how it worked. Right. And so this whole time, DT was really upset that he was a holdout because he thought that it made it seem like he didn't want to play and that he only cared about money. He was mad that and again, it's his agent's job. That's what they should be getting him as much money as possible. But DT just wanted to play. So cut to one random day at the office. And my dad happened to be working on Rod Smith. And I went into my dad's office as often as possible. I was in college at the time. I think I was a junior. And I think I might have been home for the summer, or maybe it was spring break or something. So, of course, I was in the office. And in walks DT. And I forgot who brought him in, but one of his teammates brought him in, as is, that's how it works with our office. And first thing I ever thought when I saw him was this dude's massive. And I mean, I don't know if people forget, when he was drafted, he was 6'3" and a half, 230, 235. He was a big dude, and he kind of slimmed down over the years and lost some of that. I guess you call it baby weight, or baby fat, but it looked like muscle to me. Yeah. The dude looked like a tight end. He looked like a freaking Adonis. And he walks into the office, and my dad works on him, and he's kind of, my dad was always great at connecting with the players. And I think that was a big reason why they always wanted to come in, because there's just great energy in the office. And DT kind of told him yeah, I'm going to hold out for my contract because my agent's working on stuff. He goes, I don't really have anywhere to stay. And I was going to stay with this guy, but then this happened and whatever. And my dad says, why don't you come stay with me? And keep in mind, Rod Smith is in there, who's been my dad's patient at that point for 15 years, right?
What about me?
And, well, no, Rod had a gorgeous house. He was all good. No, but Rod said to DT, he's like, "Oh man, take that, go stay with Dr. V. No distractions, no nothing. You go do that."
That's cool.
And so because Rod Smith happened to be in there, and he was the greatest Broncos receiver of all time at that point, Demaryius is like, Rod Smith tells me to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And so, I was just kind of chatting DT up and whatever. And my dad's like, hey, take him back to the house, let him get all settled. And I was like, all right, cool. And so I think I can't remember if DT even had a car. He might have had a rental. I think he followed me to the house, and we put his stuff down in the basement. And this whole time I'm like, my God, Demaryius Thomas is going to live in our house. This is crazy.
Wow.
And the best part is my dad never told my mom. And so DT ended up going, like, he went to go work out or something, but in their basement, they had like a really nice bedroom, personal bathroom, everything. So he had a lot of privacy down there. And he had just like his one little suitcase and then his dob kit. And so he's out working out or doing whatever. My mom comes home and we're talking about dinner. And I said, "Oh, did you get enough for Demaryius?" I said, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" I said, "Demaryius Thomas, he's the Broncos' first round draft pick. He's going to be living with us." And she said, "Mario, shut up. No, he's not. Like, why are you messing with me?" And to be fair, like, I mess with my mom a lot. Okay. So she was well within her right to think that I was joking around. And I said, "Mom, Demaryius Thomas is staying at our house." She goes, "Mario, I don't have time for this. I have to start dinner. Like, quit jacking around." I said, "Go look downstairs." She's like, "Okay." So she humored me. She went downstairs, and sure enough, there's his little suitcase and his little dob kit. And she goes, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, "Dad didn't tell you?" And she's like, "No, he didn't tell me." And
surprise.
So that was kind of surprise. And so that was kind of where it all started when when DT was living with us. And my favorite part of that story, this was the day before he signed his contract officially. Mm-hmm. And one of my good friends was throwing a party up in Boulder where I was going at the time. And I was going to head up there, and I asked DT, I said, "Hey, I'm going to a house party in Boulder. Would you want to go?" Because he was kind of stressed out about all the contract stuff. Right. And he's like, "Oh, man, I don't know. I might just chill." And I was like, "All right, well, let me know." And I think it was earlier that day, one of the guys that he was on the team with had gotten traded or cut or something like that. And he's like, "You know what? I will come up with you." And I was like, "All right, like, do you want to let off some steam? Like, I can be the driver if you want to." And he's like, No, I don't really drink." So I went up there with like 3 of my other friends, and we're in this like big like Chevy Yukon or something. Like he ended up getting like some rental car from one of these companies. So he's got this big truck. And so here we are driving up to Boulder with Demaryius Thomas as our designated driver, right?
Wow.
And so we walk into this house, and apparently the word had gotten out that DT was showing up. And I had only told a couple people, and only one of them believed me. Everyone else was like, no, Demaryius Thomas, that's adorable, Mario. He's not coming to this party. And somehow the word spread. And I had talked to one of my friends afterwards. He's like, "Yeah, when we had planned this, it was originally like 12 people. We walk into this house, there's 40 people in there, 50 people. Wow. And I swear we walk into the front door and you could hear a record scratch. It was like, and everybody just kind of like dropped and looked. Because I don't know if you're familiar with Boulder.
Yeah,
not real diverse.
No,
okay,
no.
Not a real diverse place.
Nope.
If a 6'3", 225-pound muscular black dude goes somewhere in Boulder, you assume he's an athlete. And the best part, one of my close friends, we affectionately knew him as Drunk Mitch. He saw him, and DT was wearing a Rockies hat because he's trying to support the local team. Right. And this guy goes, "Oh my God, it's Dexter Fowler." So we end up playing. We end up playing beer pong, and other people are drinking Demaryius's drinks because who wouldn't want to? They're like, "Oh my gosh, I was drinking Demaryius Thomas's beers in beer pong because he's the DD." Did not have one drop of alcohol that night. And what he started doing, if you're familiar with beer pong, you go like this, but if your elbow goes over the table, it's basically a foul, true. Right? You can't do that.
True, right.
But Demaryius is so big and long that he's consistently putting his elbow over the table to the point where he knew that they were talking about him, but no one would say anything. And so he nudged me one time. He goes, "Watch this." He reached his big, long arm damn near halfway across the table and just dropped the ball in.
Wow.
And my 2 buddies on the other side that we were playing against, they're kind of looking like looking at me, and I was like, "Say something." You want to say something? Tell him. Say something to him. And no one said anything.
No, of course
and one
not.
of the funniest things that he did that night, he would go up to random people who were taking shots. Mm-hmm. And so, you take a shot and then you chase it with something, right?
Right.
People he did not know, like random people. They would take a shot and then they would go to chase their shot, and with his big ass hand would just come and grab them like this. So they couldn't chase their shot. He did that like 10 times. And then again, like, nobody was mad. They were just kind of like, oh my God, Demaryius Thomas is pranking me.
Oh, that's so classic, man. It sounds to me like, I was going to say, it sounds to me like DT was just a really down-to-earth, humble, appreciative kind of guy. That's how I see him.
The greatest human, man. Like, so quiet and soft-spoken, but all the stuff that you heard about him, about like how his smile would light up a room and how he had just like the most positive energy and the positive aura around him. It was all true. Like, he brightened up every single room that he was in, and he was such an incredible, unique soul, and just like one of the best people that I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And I tell that story as often as possible because I want as many people as possible to hear the story about DT before he was Demaryius Thomas, before he was catching Peyton Manning's all-time touchdown record, and before he was all-pro, and before he was a household name, and before he was considered one of, if not the best Broncos receivers of all time. He was, I called him my blindside brother, right? Like that movie, The Blind Side.
Right.
And so he was just a member of the family, man. Like everybody knew him as this football player. Like he spent Christmases with us. He came to birthday parties with us, like came over to the house for dinner. He was an enigmatic human being, absolutely unique and incredible.
And you know what? It all started with that one moment with Rod Smith and him being in there with your dad, and then him being at your house. And he was forever your brother, man. It sounds like to me he was forever your brother. That's awesome.
Absolutely, forever, yeah.
Real quick, Glenn has a question for you. There you go.
Mario, what made your dad special with his relationship with the players? Honestly, Glenn, it's something that I've tried to emulate, and that's like, of all the things that my dad taught me, and there were so many, the number one thing that he taught me being in this line of work is being able to connect with your patients on a personal, almost intimate level, right? Like, I don't want people, and he didn't want people coming in saying, I have to go to the doctor's office, I have to do this. Like, he didn't want it to be considered a chore. He wanted people to get excited, like, oh, I get to go see Dr. Vetanze today. And that's how I've tried to approach everything in my practice. Like every single person that walks through my door, I want them to feel like welcome and like we're old friends, and that like we go way back. And I just want them to feel as comfortable as possible, to the point where they're so excited to be there, to feel that positive energy. And that's what my dad did better than everybody, not just with Bronco players, but with every single one of his patients. And I think that was the number one thing of when he started working again on Otis Armstrong and Rick Upchurch and the hundreds of Bronco players that he saw over the years. It was always that, like, no matter who they were, no matter what their background was, no matter what their story was, he had this uncanny ability to connect with every single solitary one of them on a very personal level. A guy like Bill Romanowski, who, his demeanor is kind of like what you as a Bronco fan would expect. Like, that's kind of how Bill is. He keeps people at a distance, and my dad was able to connect with him. Derek Wolfe, big, scary guy, had a rough childhood, wasn't always, the most zen dude, like, had a very small circle. Like, that was another guy that my dad bonded with, and the list goes on and on and on. So I think it was something that you can't teach. He just connected with every person that he ever came into contact with.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mario, you have been more than generous with your time. I totally appreciate it. Thank you so much for your insight, your stories. Before we cut out of here, I just like to have you say how people can get in contact with you if they're in the Denver area or wherever. If you want to promote your your business, please do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, if you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Vetanze Therapy, V as in Victor, ETANZE Therapy. Used to be Mile High Mario, but once again, it's a sore subject that we won't talk about. Thanks a lot, Elon Musk. And if you want to see a little bit more about like what I do and like the services that I offer, how to get into contact with me, with my office, where we're located, you can just go to vetanzetherapy.com. Everything, like every question that you could possibly have can be answered on there. And if you want to reach me personally, like feel free. My DMs are open in the least creepy way possible. Yeah, just hit me the DM if you have any sort of question, if you have something that's ailing you, if you have, a friend or family member, yourself, anybody where, they're in pain or you're in pain, give me a chance to help you out. Come at me and I will do my best to get you better.
Absolutely. Mario, once again, thanks so much for your time. Excuse me. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for being on here. I know I've kept you for almost an hour, but it's those stories.
It was worth it, though. It was a great show, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Guys, I'm not going to take too much more time. We got shows every day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We got the Avalanche, Avalanche Neighborhood. There you go. Let's ride. There you go.
Let's ride.
Absolutely. We got the Avalanche neighborhood this Saturday, tomorrow. So please tune in for that. Other than that, Mario, thanks so much again. I really appreciate you being on. Thanks for all the guys in the chat. I would name you personally, but time, I don't want to take any more time from Mario. So guys, till next Friday, have a great weekend. We will talk to you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never ran